Hi, my name is Renata Serra. I'm faculty at the Center for African Studies at the University of Florida and also expert in the policy area of inquiry for the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems, also at the University of Florida. This is a part one of a short but important talk on how to bridge research and policy through engagement and communication. While at the Innovation Lab we focus mainly on livestock systems, we would like to think that bridging research and policymakers spaces are important for all area of development, be it in agriculture, health, education. So we hope this talk is interesting to a wide variety of people and actors beyond livestock systems. Now, research and policy seems to be two irreconcilable words. There are a lot of stereotypes that each part attached to the other. So let's review those briefly. How are researchers perceived? Often as very insulated from reality. They are perceived as producing knowledge per se without any real applications to the real world. Sometimes researchers are perceived and represented as totally detached from the practical issues of life. And academia is represented as an ivory tower, and academia is the main producer of research and seems to have its own rules, again, disconnected from the world. How are policymakers represented, especially from researchers' point of view? Policymakers are regarded as being driven by self-serving political motives, not by objectivity or evidence. They often are under multiple pressure and they lack time to think through possible contingencies where implementing interventions. And often they lack incentives to take all factors into account when implementing interventions. So how to bridge the policy and research world, and why is it so important? I would say that there are new rules in towns. There are new pressures that we have all to be aware of and we are subject to. First of all, research for development is expanding and funding for research for development is expanding, which means that donors or funders, funding agencies, really would like to sponsor research that has real applications and consequence for development interventions and actions. Secondly, we are in an era in which participatory processes, stakeholder involvement are really important. Stakeholder is a term we use for designating a series of actors who stand to lose or gain from a specific issue, from a specific interventions, for instance. And engaging all these parties who have a stake in an issue, having them talk to one another, is really important at all levels of action and decision making. And thirdly, in an era, in the digital era, in the era of social media, of multiplications of sources of knowledge, is really important for those who know, who collect evidence, who accumulate knowledge, to be able to communicate that to a wider audience, to go beyond their comfort zone, to share in multiple ways, not only through academic and journal publications, their findings, their reflections, and their understanding. So given these new pressures and these new dynamics, what's in it for researchers and policymakers? Why do they have to be part of this? In terms of researchers, we alluded to this fact earlier that more and more funding agencies demand researchers to demonstrate impact, to demonstrate that not only they can produce knowledge, but this is relevant and is going to change things on the ground and things for implementing agencies. Secondly, there's a pressure for research to produce findings and results that are not just applicable to the particular context, but they can be generalized, they can be scaled up, which means that findings from one context may teach us lessons, may tell us things that can be helpful when thinking of another context, when thinking of intervention in another setting. And this is important, especially if we think that after a certain project, we want an uptake, we want to continue at a larger scale, not just continue to do what we do at the same way. And thirdly, researchers may be truly interested in making a difference in the world, in making sure that the research improves lives, improves health or incomes, education, or political voice to the marginalized. So there are a lot of researchers that are intrinsically interested in real applications to improve the world. What's in it for policymakers? More and more governments and decision makers are pressed to demonstrate evidence for interventions that they are proposing, or demonstrate a rationale, a justification. And this finds itself often in research. Also, research is no more the priority of university, or not exclusively. Also, governments and NGOs increasingly have demand for new research. They produce themselves research. And this is another important site of knowledge in dialogue with policymaking. Research can also, research evidence and findings can also help policymakers decide among alternative options which one is the best, or which one is the most feasible, or which one advances the cause that they espouse the farthest, and so forth. And finally, also policymakers can use research to learn about unintended or possible unintended consequences of their interventions, and in this case to reduce margins of uncertainty. So we see that there are a lot of reasons why both policymakers and researchers should be interested in bridging the gap. And this concludes part 1 of this talk, and we hope you can join us for part 2, in which we are going to see ways in which this can be done and what are the points of entries. Thank you very much for your attention.